What's up, everybody? This is Will Chow from Will's Personal Development Show, coming to you with another podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about sleeping better. Basically, sleep is one of the most important things and most commonly mentioned things for all types of different areas of success. So, how do you actually sleep better? Well, I've dived into a lot of books, a lot of science on this. I've covered all the common books on sleep, listened to all the podcasts on sleep. Read Arianna Huffington's Sleep Revolution, and frankly, everything that they tell you can be summarized in like 5 to 10 tips, really. They try and cite good science behind it, but really there's maybe like a few main studies and like a lot of redundant stuff. So I think with this one podcast episode, you can get like almost everything you can possibly do to improve your sleep within one podcast episode, very short and concise. And then you don't have to worry about reading all the books and listening to all the podcast episodes and YouTube videos that I have. And by the way, just if you're curious, I don't think Sleep Revolution, that book by Arianna Huffington, is that great. I did a whole article reviewing the book and summarizing it, and she started to ramble a lot, and there wasn't much science backing up her points. She went into a lot of anecdotal stories and then made a lot of assertions and plugs on gizmos and gadgets that were kind of just randomly inserted, didn't really contribute mostly to the science-backed points. So don't recommend that book per se. I think she's an incredible human. I think she had a huge work ethic, which spurred the book in the first place. She actually collapsed from exhaustion while overworking one day, which spurred her to champion sleep as the cure-all to overwork, and I found that very fascinating. But I think you can just get the most out of this podcast without having to read those books. So let's just get into it. What's the number one first thing that you should do to get better at sleeping well? I think the first thing I recommend is get on the whole train of blue light blocking. Now, some people go to extreme and they buy blue light blocking sunglasses, and you don't have to do that. First off, all you need to do is install some free apps on your phone and your computer to block blue light. Now, you might be wondering, well, what's the big deal with blue light? Why do I have to block it? Essentially, blue light is a spectrum of light that's emitted from all electronic devices, any type of screen you have that is part of the spectrum that you might get while you're awake. So when you get that while it's nighttime, when the sun has set, it doesn't tell your body to shut down. It tells your body, oh, it's still daytime, stay awake. So you're really causing yourself a huge disservice by having blue light on, because it's telling your body, your eyes, it's still daytime, stay awake. You know, back in the day, back how our bodies are programmed to function, we went to sleep shortly after the sun set, so around 5, 6, 7 p.m. So think about that. When we were used to sunset and sun rise routines, that's how we're going to behave. So the iPhone has a built-in system for this right in our general settings, and you can it even has a option that allows you to set it to turn off blue light at sunset or sunset, and then turn it back on during sunrise. But you can customize it so that it turns on or turns off whenever you want. There's also a bunch of free programs on the computer that do the same thing. My favorite is called Flux, Flux. So I highly recommend that installed not just on your home computer, but on your work computer, your work laptop, because you just never know. And I always suggest doing it earlier than normal. So don't just set it to like 1 hour before you go to sleep at midnight. Set it a few hours earlier. Set it at sunset. That's what I do. And another thing about it is that, it takes time for your body to process the change. So of course it's not some robot. So if you set it like 20 minutes before you go to sleep to turn off blue light, that's not going to be enough time. Your body needs time to process that change and realize, okay, we're ramping up to go back to sleep. Also, check out other electronic devices. What else are you using? Let's say you play on your Nintendo Switch or some other handheld game device at night. Well, that emits blue light as well. Do you have it set to reduce blue light? If not, don't play those games at night. I always recommend not going against willpower, so it's much easier to set it to reduce blue light rather than to hope and pray that the little willpower you have at the end of the day is enough to restrain yourself from using your phone or computer or play video games. That's just not feasible for a lot of people. So, by the way, if you have a iOS device, all you have to do is go to Settings, Display and Brightness, and then there will be a option called Night Shift. Once you click in the night shift, turn it on, and then at the very bottom there is a color temperature scale. So there's a scale for how much blue light your phone will block. Now I set it to the warmest setting possible. It goes from less warm to more warm. I set it to the most warm to get the maximum reduction of blue light. And that's what I recommend for you. You may notice that your screen has a twinge of orange to it. That's because they've removed all the blue light. So at first, and for me it was very short, like it took only like a couple days to adjust. At first it'll look kind of weird, but then after just a couple days you don't even notice the change. You don't even notice it go from regular coloring to orange. It just looks normal when it's in the orange setting, because you just gradually get used to it. And I've even had people come up to me and say, "Hey, why is your phone so orange?" And I'll look down at it and I'm like, "Wait, it's orange? It doesn't look orange to me." You just get used to it over time. So there's a huge benefit to it and really no downside to it. And the best part is you don't look weird either. When people ask that, I explain it, and if anything, the only responses I've gotten are, "Oh wow, that's very interesting." And some of them may even like put it on themselves, and some of them will say, "Oh man, I really need to do that." So that's the first tip. The second tip is caffeine reduction before 1 p.m. So basically how caffeine works is it stays in your system. It has a long half-life for several hours. And I used to have a lot of trouble sleeping, and one of the pinpoints I found was caffeine. So turns out a lot of people assume that, oh, if I just stop drinking it like before I eat dinner, I'll be fine. That's not true at all. You have to stop drinking caffeine before sometimes noon to really make sure that it doesn't linger with you and prevent you from staying up. Even if you do manage to go to sleep when there's still caffeine in your system, because I'm sure there's people who will be like, "Oh, I've been able to sleep even though I drink coffee at night," you're likely going to have a hard time doing so. It's going to take a lot longer. You're going to waste a lot more time to get into sleep. And then when you are in sleep, you're not getting to that deep REM sleep that is the best for creativity, for recovery, for health, and for brain performance. You're probably getting very shallow levels of sleep because the caffeine is still in your system. So if you really want to stretch it to the max, because I know some people love caffeine, I personally like to drink green tea. So I will at the latest go to 2 p.m. Sometimes I really want to get that green tea in because it boosts brain performance and fat loss. So at the latest, I'll drink up until 2 p.m. But usually I'll cut it off at noon at the latest. And you can always kind of water down the caffeine intake you have. If it's really addicting or you really like caffeine, you can water it down. So, dilute it with more water so that it's not as strong. I do that a lot with my green tea. A lot of people love coffee. A lot of people love soda and they can't get off soda. Well, there's Sprite, there's Sierra Mist. There are caffeine-free options that taste amazing too. Really, you should get off all sugar or all added sugar and stick to natural fruits. So you try and wean off soda if you can, but in the meantime, there are caffeine-free options that you can choose. Sugar is another component to lack of brain performance. We consume way too much sugar, and if you want to get sugar, get from natural sources like fruit. So, what's the next tip? Now that you have the caffeine out of your system, the blue light out of your system, I recommend going into healthy eating. So what you eat on a daily basis for lunch and dinner, make a huge impact. Now, I know a lot of you people out there aren't super optimizers. I think that's a very rare percentage of people like me who like optimizing every part of their system. I know a few of them and they go crazy. They'll buy like these blue light blocking glasses and they just think it's normal and they think anyone else who's not like that is just, not up to snuff. But in reality, other people are like, man, this guy's just like going too crazy about it. And I don't think you have to go to that extreme. If you don't want to buy blue light blocking glasses, you don't want to be made fun of for going to that extreme, you don't have to. And who's to say that those diminishing returns of extra effectiveness are actually really worth it? Like maybe you're getting strands of blue light from the street lamps outside or something like that. Does that really have such an impact that you're going to be walking around with blue shaded glasses? I mean, sure, maybe you can make it look cool, but you don't have to spend that money. If you don't have that money, you don't have to go to those extremities of it. So same thing with food. Like there's all these like tiny things you can do. Like you can eat like just one block of dark chocolate, 85%, no more, blueberries, and all these other crazy stuff, antioxidants. And that definitely helps, but no need to get too extreme. I would say like the biggest impacts for your sleep and just general well-being are getting enough of the right stuff in and the wrong stuff out. So reduce your fried food consumption, reduce your sugar consumption. And that doesn't mean eliminate all fats or eliminate all sugars. I'm just saying that most people eat excessively way too much sugar. So how do you actually get a baseline for it? Simply turn whatever food you have over. Most food you buy has a nutrition facts label. If it doesn't, just Google it. Just use MyFitnessPal or just use Google and you get a clear amount of data on how much sugar eating that food has. So that's really how I identify what I can and cannot eat. You have a baseline to go from. It's recommended that you should only have at max 40 grams of sugar a day. So then when you tempted to buy Jamba Juice and you look it up and you realize that Jamba Juice has 70 grams of sugar in just one cup, you realize maybe I shouldn't be eating this smoothie. That's why Jamba Juice is so popular. It seems healthy, but they stuff it with sugar. And that's really where I can find out things that taste just as good that just have much less sugar. There's a false assumption that like things that have a lot of sugar taste good and things that have little sugar taste bad, and that's not the case. I have a whole pantry of snacks and food, and before I was looking at sugar, I just thought all of it tasted good. But then I looked at sugar and I'm like, wow, this one tastes really good but has very little sugar. This one tastes really good, but it has tons of sugar. And this one tastes, about the same as all the others, and it has twice as much sugar. And you realize that there's not always a correlation. Some stuff that has less sugar tastes really good. And so, generally there is some correlation. Of course, more sugar tastes good, but sometimes they just stuff it with like 100 grams of sugar, and you don't really get much extra out of it. So that's something that just by paying attention, you can cut out a lot of things that you get just diminishing returns in terms of the pleasure you have in your mouth. I found that for me personally, and it differs for everyone because everyone has different preferences, but for me personally, I like certain types of food like blueberries and dark chocolate and almonds and mixed nuts and popcorn just as much as juicy fruit or M&Ms or Hershey's chocolate. But the latter foods I mentioned have like 3 or 4 times as much sugar in them. So just by understanding that, you can just kind of make these slight tweaks, and you're off to the races. Another part of good nutrition is uh, having the right types of foods that and drinks that will induce sleep. So there are caffeine-free sleep-inducing teas out there that are all natural, organic, and can very well help you sleep better if you brew them at night. Another big thing is just reducing processed foods. So anything that you can't really find naturally, that doesn't look like real food, that can sit on a shelf for a couple years without going bad, that's usually stuff that you want to reduce. You don't have to eliminate it completely. I know the extremists will tell you that, but most people are just normal people and they don't have that level of willpower. And who's to say that you need to eliminate all bread from your system to live a good life? That's probably too extremist. I think everything in moderation is okay. So for me personally, I still eat bread, but I just eat it less. I usually eat more chicken on its own than chicken sandwiches. I'll have the occasional chicken sandwich, but just knowing that like I want to reduce this intake helps me. So when I go to Chick-fil-A, I usually opt for the grilled chicken nuggets and sometimes the fried chicken nuggets over the chicken sandwich for that reason. I get less fat, I get more protein, I get less processed food from that, and I get less fried food usually. So that's a very easy way of getting things in. Eat your leafy greens, eat your good fats. Avocados and almonds have a lot of good fat. Eat a handful of mixed nuts every day. So those are like the big things you can do. There's all sorts of small things that I'll just include for those out there who are like me and want to just optimize everything. But again, you don't have to do this. Other things you can do are drink green tea in the morning. You can eat salmon. Salmon has tons of the optimal amounts of omega-3. There's also flax seeds and oats and all different types of sunflower seeds and various ways you can get your omega-3s. Just search up a list of omega-3s, list of good fats, and pick 2 or 3 from the list that you personally enjoy and add those to your diet. For me specifically, there's a great product that you can get at Costco called Aussie Bites, and they have all the omega-3, like they mix flax seeds and all these different types into this like little cookie that you can eat, and it tastes great, doesn't have too much sugar or fat. So I eat usually 1 or 2 of those a day, and like just one tiny bit of dark chocolate, and then I'll add in some creatine and that's more so for muscle performance, and whey protein powder for muscle performance. So that's kind of what I do. Mix and match. Make sure you have your vegetables in there, your leafy greens. Doesn't matter which ones. Obviously, certain vegetables, kale is a big one, that can be very beneficial to you. Have your vegetables in there, have your fruits in there, and then have the right types of protein, the ones with less fat in them. Again, it's not about reducing all fat or all carbs. It's about having a good amount of fat, but not excessive amounts of fat. Usually the fried foods are pumped with fat, low in protein, low in the good micronutrients. And that's really all you need. If I were to summarize this in like one sentence, it would just be about eating lots of vegetables, reduce your processed foods, and make sure that you get good fats in. So it's as simple as that. And maybe like add dark chocolate and other antioxidants from fruit. So it's really that simple. There's even at Costco, there's even like these little nut packs that they have now that are labeled omega-3 nut packs or something like that. And I eat those all the time. And they just like stuff it with all these different types of nuts and seeds, and you can get your omega-3s from there as well. You can also get it from fish, as mentioned. Salmon is one of the best sources, but there's plenty of others. So now you got your nutrition down, which personally, I think it's a base, but it's not necessary. I would say you get the first two, blue light blocking and caffeine, you're already halfway home. Nutrition is like a side thing that you can improve on, but I wouldn't say it's really that necessary. Like, so then what's the next thing? Exercise. So specifically, like some level of cardiovascular metabolic exercise. You're not gonna really impact your sleep much by just lifting weights and not breaking a sweat. Like if you're just doing strength training and trying to build the size of your muscles or the strength of your muscles, you rarely ever break a sweat, and you're not really activating your cardiovascular system and making your heart muscle grow stronger. What you need to do is something that's going to get your heart muscle trained, and that's the type of sweating that's needed to get you into a good state to go to sleep. So for me personally, I like high intensity interval training because I've just found it to be most impactful for reducing my resting heart rate. If your resting heart rate is lower, it means it has less beats per minute, and that's because your heart muscle is bigger and stronger, so that each time it squeezes, it can pump more blood throughout your entire system in less time and less effort. So resting heart rate is a great way to get a sense for like just where you stack in terms of your health and your exercise routine. So just even 20 minutes or 10 minutes of high intensity interval training. I like CrossFit workouts because it gets me competitive and it pushes me harder than usual when there's other people around. That's one way of just getting your heart rate up and getting a good sweat, and that'll just activate you for good sleep. Now, some people feel like they're just too energized and feeling good after a workout, so they can't get to sleep. Well, then do it in the morning, do it in the evening before dinner. That way you still have a few hours before you actually go to sleep. That's what I do. Some people say like do everything in the morning. Be a morning person. Wake up at 5 a.m. Meditate. Blah, blah, blah. Well, there's been studies that have come out. There's a great YouTube channel that covered this topic in one of their videos, Picture Fit. Jeff Nippert is another science-backed YouTuber who has covered this topic in depth. And they found that, no, people are genetically wired to be night people and genetically wired to be morning people. If you really want to, you can have enough willpower to switch, but it'll be against your genetics, but it's still doable. But the biggest discovery they found is that, in fact, there is a slight benefit to working out in the evenings or at night, because by doing so, it just stimulates your muscles more, and that's the time of day where your body is most attuned and active and ready to work out to get more muscle growth. That said, it was a small increase based on the study groups and versus the control. So the increase wasn't much. And what's more important than that is sustainability. So if you find it much more sustainable, and that's really what people struggle with, if you find it more sustainable to work out in the morning, then do it in the morning. So choose whatever time works best, but get your exercise in, and that's really going to help you with your sleep. It's just going to stimulate you for better sleep. And, a lot of people I know are morning people, and they make it seem like it's better. And a lot of influencers and, entrepreneurs and successful people say that morning is better. But at the same time, I've seen plenty of successful people who don't do that. Jeff Cavaliere of Athlete Next, he's a night owl as well. He still gets the same work done, it's just during the night. So there's a lot of hype and trendy stuff about like, oh, you should do this in the morning, you should meditate, you should cold shower. I think a lot of that crap is just like very diminishing returns. Like, what really matters is, do you put in all the work? It doesn't matter if you do it in the morning or in the nighttime. Do you put in more work than most people? Do you work really, really hard? And all that other crap, like, you should meditate, cold shower, all that stuff. Like, I see a lot of like youngsters doing this stuff, but like, is it really like impacting them much? Like, not really. Like, I don't see like Arnold Schwarzenegger, doing all these crazy stuff like journaling, gratitude exercise, then cold shower, then meditate, and then like all this stuff. Like Tim Ferriss had Arnold on his podcast, and he's like, "Did you meditate?" And he was like, "I did for a short while when I was like young, because when I had all this stuff going on, like I wanted to kind of like have more control, but I don't do it anymore." So like even he doesn't really meditate now. So I think there's a lot of like hype and trendy stuff going on now, and it's just going to make you feel more overwhelmed and frustrated with all like 12 different to-do things. I think what's most impactful is find the big rocks, the big things that are going to make the most impact. Working hard, sleeping right, and if not sleeping right, exercise, and then doing those. Doesn't matter what time you're doing them, just get them done. Work hard. So that just about rounds out the big priorities. I mean, it's simple as that. Caffeine, blue light, eating right, and then exercise. That's about it. Now there's all these other small things that you can do that I'm going to list here, but as I just mentioned, you get those big priorities in. The other stuff have diminishing returns. Only focus on those once you get the big ones down, because people love to optimize, but at the end of the day, like there's a point where it's just like ridiculous, and like really how much are these small things helping? Now without further ado, let's just get into some of those smaller things that can improve your sleep. So this one is technically pretty big for some people, so it is technically worth noting. Reduce any type of light input. So if you're really still struggling after all those other things are in line, it's usually due to just straight up light, not just blue light, but any light. So you have to simulate an environment as if the sun has set. So if your house is full of artificial light, like you have your TV on, you have your like lamp lights on, you have street lights on, you're walking around in the city at midnight, and the city of course has tons of lights, then your body is going to perceive it as if you're still in the daytime. So put on some blinders. Tucker Max, an entrepreneur, he ended up sleeping in a closet. Now he's rich, so he had a really big closet, but he slept in a closet because he could close the door and it'd be pitch black in there, and it would simulate a sunset, and therefore his body would be like, okay, it's time to go to sleep. Then you can go straight up go to sleep. So very impactful. That's what I do. I close all the blinders, try and simulate as dark an environment as I can. Sometimes I even put covers over my head. Now that does kind of block off good airflow a bit, but there's like different layers of darkness you can get to. So just by like putting covers on my head, I noticed like, oh, that got darker. Like if you don't want to do that, and you don't want to cheap out like me, just buy some covers for your eyes. Like that's what a lot of people do. Like put some eye covers on, and that can really impact like how dark you perceive it is, and then you can get to sleep there. Noise is another one. A lot of noise can be jarring for some people. Some people like it pitch silent. In reality, if you look back to our ancestors and you model like how their biology is wired, because that's how our biology is wired still, because we evolved much slower than technology, a lot of them slept out in areas where there's tons of noise from like birds and creatures of the night. I mean, if you've ever camped out at night, the forest is a very noisy place at night. So I think the switch is not from to going to zero noise, because a lot of people who live in the city, that's very tough to do. The switch is more so to go to natural noise. So if you really can't go into like pitch silence, an alternative or something that might work better, even if you can go to pitch silence, but you're not getting any type of improvement, is to go ahead and see if you can either move somewhere with natural noise, like next to a forest, or if you can't do that, have soundtracks. So there's like free soundtracks on YouTube that offer this, but if you're not a big YouTube fan, or you don't want to buy YouTube Red to remove the ads, uh, you can install an ad blocker. But another option is there's soundtracks you can buy. You can go on Spotify or just buy a CD where there's just natural jungle noise or natural savanna animal life noise at night. And those are actual soundtracks that aren't artificial. They actually have someone with premium audio equipment go into a forest and record it for 12 hours straight, or 24 hours straight sometimes. And you could play that and it could help you go to sleep. Another thing that could be very beneficial for you is just programming the light to wake you up at the right time. So Matt Frazier, the CrossFit Games champion 4 times in a row, he has this device that you can buy online, and it's only $50, but it's basically a natural daylight simulator alarm clock. So basically he sets a time for it to wake him up, and then rather than playing sound or anything, instead of that, it simulates light, the sun rising. And when he feels that perception of light, he's okay, his body's okay, it's time to wake up. If you're rich enough or if you're creative enough, you can have the blinds do it for you. So you can literally have the blinds open at a certain time and let the sun come in, and then close at a certain time to simulate darkness. The ideal situation is just to live in a place where there's no street lights or anything like that, and you're just going to sleep near or around sunset and sunrise. Obviously not going to be ideal for most people in the Western world, because that's rarely not possible, but I would say it is possible to an extent. A lot of people live in the suburbs or in the country or in farms, and guess what? There's very few lights there, and just gotta not use your artificial lights in your house as much, and then just keep the window open all the time, or just have no blinders. And guess what's going to happen? Once the sun sets, it's going to be dark, and then once the sun rises, you're going to be oh shoot, it's time to wake up. And if you're a traveler of any sort, it's pretty easy to do as well. I went to this remote island in Siargao of the Philippines, which is in Southeast Asia, for vacation and leisure. You can see some photos of it on my Instagram. Just go to willyoulaugh.com, and then there's a link there to all my social media accounts. But my Instagram handle is willyoulaugh_, and that place had no lights. Actually, it did. So I stayed at this hut. It was a resort, but when I showed up there, it was basically a moderate to low tier grass hut. It was much better than some of the other huts and apartments there. But essentially they had one light, and that was about it. And then a little balcony that you could walk to and look at the waves from. And essentially I opted out to not use the light, the artificial light in the room. And so basically when the sun set at 6 p.m. I was all right, pretty much time to go to sleep. And then when I woke up at 4 or 4ish a.m., it was oh shoot, that's a really nice sunset. So there are ways of doing this if you travel a lot, and it can be super easy and relaxing to do. Because it's just the natural setting of all these really exotic places you visit. And it doesn't have to be expensive either. Southeast Asia is sometimes dirt cheap. I would say it's getting more expensive nowadays, but still usually a fraction of the price you would pay in a first world country. So it depends what you define as dirt cheap, but it's doable. And then a few other small things you can do to tweak your sleep. There's if you there's all natural herbs and multivitamins and stuff you can eat that will induce sleep. There's like sleep-inducing, organic, all-natural vitamin pills and stuff like that. If you want to do that, I don't personally take those, but that's something that can be beneficial as well. Comfort is also huge. So, depending on the type of mattress you have and the pillow you have, if it's really old or beat up, that can have an impact. If it's really saggy, it can have an impact. So just tweaking out the mattress. I know that's a really big purchase at times, but just having the right mattress can really benefit you, and it can just double or triple your comfort and how good you feel. So that helps. Another thing is reading fiction. So I'm known as the guy who reads tons of nonfiction books. I'm always citing different books in my podcast, but I've recently wrote an article on my blog on why I have returned to reading fiction, and I specifically read fiction at night. But the basic idea is that fiction kind of opens your mind up to fantasy and opens up your creativity and subconscious, and it just is a good break from the burnout of just constantly educating yourself. It's entertaining rather than like a chore. So fiction is a great way. I love fiction audiobooks. That's how I get my fix for fiction in. And so that's one thing you can easily do to improve just the mood that you put your mind into. You can even like just let it go. Just kind of like the all natural music. Just let it play. And don't feel like you're obligated to turn it off. Just let it play until it drags you into another world, and then you fall asleep while listening to it. For me, I tend to turn it off because I'm pretty good at going to sleep, but it is another way of getting to sleep pretty quickly. Another way is with sex. So sex, or some people say healthy masturbation does the same thing. The orgasmic state of it releases certain hormones and melatonin that just generates the natural sleep producing state that a lot of people require to get into the sleep state. So that's another very easy, quick way of getting to sleep. And of course, if you combine all these together, you're getting a massive effect for good sleep. Now, jumping back to that one on fiction, I will say that some people have found it's very easy to get to a sleep state via other entertainment fiction sources. So some people like TV, and just watching a certain movie or just movies in general at a certain point just create that fantasy state, or maybe sometimes it's boredom to certain people. It's hard to say, but some people, they just naturally fall asleep to those types of things. So if you don't like books, it could potentially be a movie or TV show. Just be very careful of that. Wear blue light blocking glasses. See if you can buy a TV that has a blue light blocking feature in its settings, and that can very much benefit you. I also have a affiliate deal with Audible.com. If you're not familiar, Audible.com is a company with Amazon, and they give you like audiobooks from an extensive library that you can listen to. I think you get like a couple of audiobooks a month that you can choose from to listen to. I have a deal with them. You can get 2 free audiobooks if you go through my link. My link is willyoulaugh.com/free audiobook. No spaces, no dashes. So that's spelled WILLAUGH.com/FREEAUDIOBOOK. And that will take you to a page on audible.com where if you sign up for the first time with Audible, you get two free audiobooks of your choice to get you started there. So you know I love books, and so I'm very proud and happy to promote that offer. So that's roughly about it. I would say stay hydrated. That's probably the last one I would say. Most people think they're getting enough water, and they aren't. I would say the real indicator that you're getting too much water is uh, if your piss starts turning clear. Some people, like Jeff Nippert, he did a whole science-based YouTube video on this, and he said like just use your thirst as a guide because generally that's a good moderator of it based on studies and like how hydrated people are. I found that not to be the case myself. I think it's still a good benchmark to use, but for me personally, um, and other people I know closely, thirst on its own has been a horrible guide, especially when you're doing excessive like hiking or stuff like that, because you can just get so focused on something. Um, my father actually had a whole dehydration uh, event because we were doing this huge mountain hike, and he just thought he was fine, but the temperatures were so hot and we were going so fast that he just didn't notice and he got dehydrated. I told him to drink a little bit of water, and not a little bit. I told him drink lots of water, and he was like, okay, sure. He drank like a little gulp. He just didn't regulate and acknowledge it himself. So sometimes your thirst can be a horrible guide, just your general awareness. So for me personally, I usually go by a color of piss. So for me, um, I'll just keep drinking water because first off, it just kind of tastes pretty good, especially when you know you're washing it down with all the other snacks and stuff I mentioned earlier. Um, crisp, clear water with ice in it, delicious. Um, I just keep drinking it, and then I usually have to go to the bathroom. I have a small bladder, so then I go to the bathroom, and then after like my second run, usually that's really where my piss starts to become clear. I thought it was like something that didn't actually happen, but it did, and that's where I'm like, okay, I've been drinking too much water. I'm really fully hydrated now. I can tone it back now. And it doesn't have to be completely clear, but when it's like almost clear, you're like, okay, this is like a sign. So that's how I do it, and I found that I usually hit below the recommended standard because people have different bodies. That's why you always have to take every rule or bit of advice with a grain of salt and personalize it for yourself. The general guidelines for from health associations is 8 glasses a day. I strike well below that, around 3 or 4 glasses. I'm usually way overhydrated and like can't drink even at all anymore because my body can't take it in. I'm just like so hydrated. So there is a point of overhydration. So for me, it's just 3 to 4 glasses a day, not 8 glasses like they say in the literature. So everyone has a different set point, and there's all sorts of variables that factor in. I'm Asian, so that is different from someone who's maybe Anglo-Saxon or Italian. And then there's all these other considerations: your weight, your height, your body composition. So hydrate as well as you can based on your own principles. And there you have it. With all those things, I think you will have much better sleep than most people. And that's something that just gives you such an advantage in life over most people. Many people are sleep deprived, and it causes a lot of problems. Another part of sleeping well is just sleeping enough. A lot of people think like they have, they're getting enough sleep, but they aren't. Some people are sleep deprived even, but they don't know it. And that's the only reason that they're able to go to sleep sometimes. They're doing all these other stuff wrong. They're eating fried foods, they're drinking caffeine, but they're so sleep deprived that they still go to sleep. And it's a very unhealthy system. And you can't measure it based on your alarm clock. If you're forcing yourself to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. or whatever time, and forcing yourself to wake up with a loud noise, that's probably a sign that you're not getting enough sleep. You have your body's natural sleep system will wake up when it feels like you've gotten enough sleep. So what happens when you don't use an alarm clock of any sort and just let your body wake up naturally? Do that for a couple of days. See what happens. Usually you're waking up, a lot later, and then map it out. How many hours was that? Ask yourself, when did you go to sleep? When did you wake up? How many hours was that? And then you'll find out, like, okay, wow, I generally need X amount of hours a day. For me personally, it's about 9.5 hours to 10 hours a night. That's much more than most people, much less than some people. LeBron James apparently sleeps 12 to 13 hours a night. He is a high performance athlete, so his body needs that time to recover. Some successful people like Arnold Schwarzenegger say, you gotta sleep faster. You gotta sleep 5-6 hours a night. People have different bodies, and you have to adjust to that. And so, it really depends on your goals and your level of performance. If your biggest stumbling block is performance and you just feel tired all the time, or you really want to get higher brain performance and focus and you really feel like you're lacking in that focus, experiment with it. See what happens when you realize that you need 7 hours of sleep a night, because that's what your body is necessary, is waking up naturally with when you're not setting an alarm clock and you're only getting 5. Bump it up to 7 or 8 or whatever you need for a week, and then test to see how that's affecting your results in life. You can always experiment. And I think there's also a breaking point where you think you only need sleep for X amount of hours, and then you wake up at that point and you're like, okay, that's how much I need sleep. But then it's more of like a temporary wake up point. It's your like previous circadian rhythm adjusting to your alarm clock that now no longer rings. So instead, go back to sleep after that first time you wake up. So for example, usually I have a natural wake up point of about 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. on weekends, because that's usually when I have to wake up when my alarm clock blares. Now, most people assume, okay, that means I only need this amount of time. I'm not sleep deprived. Well, what happens is I understand that this is just based off my natural circadian rhythm. It's reacting to the fact that, usually there's a louder alarm clock at this time and an urgency to wake up. So I force myself to wake up even though I need more sleep. So instead, I go back to sleep when I have that, gut initial wake up session. Then I let myself sleep for as much as naturally possible, and usually I end up waking up around 10:30 a.m., sometimes 11:30 a.m. if I'm really sleep deprived. And so that really gives me a sense of my weekly sleep debt. So for me, I usually accumulate 3 or 2 hours of sleep that I need to wake up account for, because of the weekdays where I'm forced to wake up earlier and I get less sleep. So that gives me a general sense, okay, generally I need 9.5 hours rather than 9 hours. So if I just go to sleep a bit earlier, I can account for that and have higher performance. So that's all the essential things you need for sleep. Hopefully this podcast episode helped. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe to stay in touch.